This is interesting because they're talking about this painting here, how de Kooning was painting this one and he was kind of frustrated. He was like, just throw it away or put it in the hall or something. Like it just, he, he was just fed up with it. And then like the guy came, I don't know who it was, his friend or the dealer or whatever. And then he said, what are you working on? He said, oh, it's just up there. He said, well, can I take a look at it? And so then he said, they put it in the Museum of Modern Art. And de Kooning says, well, it wasn't finished or whatever. But then it kind of caused a scandal too, because then they put it in in the uh, in the gallery or whatnot, and some people were kind of shocked or dismayed or offended by it. And so anyway, here he's just mentioning how, he was like kind of accused of being a misogynist or whatever. I thought that maybe came later, but apparently it might have been already in his, you know, I thought it was maybe later, but it was during his lifetime. And then they talk about how there is this brutality or whatever. He says even for him, he said he looked at it as if like, that it was kind of scary for him. He said it's kind of weird because when you're painting something, you're so serious. But he said it like I wasn't really, like I was just trying to paint, like I was just trying to paint like the classical themes in art. And this is like the thing that people don't seem to understand about art. Even me, like, he said like I was just thinking about like the Venus of Willendorf, and that gave me an idea to put a woman in the painting. But he'd done other figure paintings, but he'd been doing a lot of abstract, and I think he reintroduced the figure only. So it's like there is a lot of brutality, and they're discussing that. But see, like I think what people don't understand is that artists, one of the things that they do is they work in these classical themes. There's the figure, there's the still life, there's the landscape. There's just like almost like just a small finite number of themes, that these classical themes that artists always do. And so in a way, it's like the subject is not, this is not nothing, this idea is not nothing new. The subject has nothing to do with the form. So the brutality of his form is really what the painting is about. It could be a woman, it could be a teapot, it could be a landscape, but because it's a woman, then all of a sudden people say, oh, this has latent misogynistic tendencies or something like that. But that's totally not what's going on. And what you're doing is people are obsessed with they've done this to Picasso for years, because Picasso always painted the figure and Picasso was always very brutal. So they put them together over and over. It's like, no, you're missing the point. The thing is that like they're always putting linear readings into the art, and that's not what it's about. Now you can say, was he a brutal person? Maybe, but he wasn't brutal towards women. That connection is just, that's a hidden meaning that's not there, because he was painting brutally if it was abstract, or if it was some shapes, or if it was a woman, or if it was some other figure. He was painting brutally. It had nothing to do with it being a woman or whatever. And this is the whole thing about art. And even myself, as much as I know this and understand this, and then the other day I took a look at Picasso's Crucifixion, and I'm like, this is such an insult to the crucifixion. And like, this happens to me a lot. Like, one day I'm like really irate about a painting, which doesn't happen that often because I love so much art, but then one day I'm just like, and then all of a sudden I realize it, and I'm like totally okay with it. Yeah, it makes sense. Because for one thing, Picasso wasn't trying to do an insult, but like I just thought it's so what's the word? Like it's so superficial, or it's just so trite. Like I thought, like even for me, it's like to paint that crucifixion. It just like I thought he was mocking it, the face of Christ, and I just thought he was actually mocking it because it's not just funny. It's like you're taking funny, but you can't do funny and clever and witty when it's a crucifixion. Like you have to have some limits. So I thought even at that time, I thought even for me, I have like Picasso had crossed the limits because he's a pagan and he is just openly mocking. And I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. All of a sudden I just realized it when I saw this. De Kooning. Like the other thing that artists are doing is they're painting something in an ism and or they're painting something as a Picasso. So it kind of goes back to what I was saying, like artists, that's another sort of, it's like a meme, but it's not. It's like a theme. It's the crucifixion. All the artists got to do the crucifixion. So it doesn't matter how the style is or who the artist is, but it matters actually. Yeah, it does matter who the artist, because it's Picasso does the crucifixion. So it's not really about Picasso. It's like Picasso, you could say like Cubism does the crucifixion, or late Picasso or early Picasso does the crucifixion. What I mean is that it's in that modality, it's in that style of workmanship. So it could be the crucifixion, it could be a woman, it doesn't matter. It's like Cubism is the idea. And then, okay, today Cubism does a crucifixion. So let's see what it looks like. It looks like a bunch of abstract lines. Okay, I guess that's what happens when you mix a crucifixion scene with Cubism. You get something that still just looks like a bunch of lines. Now, on the other hand, if you take a very brutal, dynamic brushstroke and you paint the crucifixion, then it looks like a brutal crucifixion. But that's not what it's about. What it's about is the fact that that was brutalism. It was brutalism, and on that day he painted a flower, and then on the next day he painted a crucifixion. So it doesn't matter if it's a flower or if it's a crucifixion, he's painting in the brutalism modality at that time in his life. So it's about Picasso does the crucifixion. Picasso does the still life. Or Picasso does a vase with flowers. And so what it's about is Picasso does this or Picasso does that. And so it's not even really about Picasso, it's about how does Picasso's idea, modality, workmanship lend itself to this idea. And that's the whole thing that like when people are into art, they like the whole thing is like when you flip through a book, you want to see what did his 1920s way of working produce when he did a vase of flowers. Now what did his 1950s or what did his Cubism phase look like when applied to flowers? And what did his realism phase look like when applied to flowers? So it's not really so much about Picasso, and yet it's totally about Picasso, but it's how did his way of working manifest itself when applied to that subject or that topic of the day. So the topic really has nothing to do with it. It's just about the artist and that time, or maybe that milieu, you could say in some ways, possibly, I'm not sure. But it's that time of the phase of their career and or the whole sort of like image of that artist and their whole like style. Like we know Picasso's style, even though Picasso is famous for having like 10 different styles that he championed, practically, or like he mastered. He championed Cubism among other things, but he championed Cubism obviously, but he mastered like 10 different things. So Picasso is not really a good example. It's better to like use someone like Matisse or someone that kind of didn't have quite as many different divergent things that he mastered. But nonetheless, we all kind of know that Picasso's the sort of abstract cubist person or whatever. And so like we all know Picasso's kind of overall image. But even though we know that it has all these divergences, even with him, we still know we kind of have his overall image. It's connected with Picasso, his stories, the way he looked, the things, his whole image. Not just who he was really, but his whole image. So when people are interested in art, that's what I think happens is they recognize Picasso's image. So what makes the art interesting is Picasso's image versus this topic, or Picasso's image versus that topic. And with these great artists, they have hundreds of thousands of works, literally, when you look at all the drawings and paintings, or tens of thousands, or thousands, at the very least, practically. If not hundreds, then certainly thousands. Or if not just hundreds. But, so there's all these examples to view that artist, but it's not really that artist, it's that artist's image. How does that artist's image, which we like, which we're attracted to, which we're fascinated by, do this? How does it do that? And that's what painting is about. And that's, I think, what people don't really get. Like, art is not about making a pretty picture. It's about somebody has a voice. They've developed and crafted a voice, and that voice may evolve, and it may go through phases, or it may go through cycles, or whatever, but we kind of know that artist's voice, just like a poet. And so the real interesting thing, like, you can't overthink art. It's actually very, very superficial. It's only about that little rush that you get when they say, how did they paint that day? And how did they paint a flower? Okay, and how did they paint a crucifix? And that's all it is, going over and over and over. When you look at a book, that's all it is. It's like, how did they paint in the 1920s? Oh, and then how did they paint in 1921? Oh, and then how did they paint in 1925? Oh, cool. And then how did they paint a woman? Oh, cool. And then how did they paint a man? Oh, cool. And then how did they paint a flowers? And then it goes round and round, now next decade. And how did they paint a flower that decade? Oh, cool. And then literally turn the page. Like, that's all it is. It's like, turn the page. And it's just that little bit of excitement of like, how did it captures, it fascinates you and it consumes you. And that's, in a way, isn't that what humans need? That's why you need to watch this TV show every day. It's totally, everything about it in a way is totally stupid, but nonetheless, you just need that little dopamine kick or that rush to see the next scene. Like, that's basically all art is. It's just, and like art is always changing, because with each new artist, like, in a way it's totally crazy, because an artist dies or whatever, or like, and then we're like, okay, so who's alive now? Let's look at their stuff. It's like, we don't really care. It's just like, it's a different person, a different image. Okay, how do they paint a flower? How do they paint a landscape? And the same thing. And like us artists, we just are consumed by doing that for like decades. It's the same with poetry, but it's the same as, it's like same as watching hockey or anything else. It's just like this little you know, I compare it to hockey a lot. Okay, it's just like it doesn't really matter anymore. You're like, what is sports? What is art? I don't know. Like but then you're like, you just limit it, or you just kind of limit it to all these sort of like more basic things that are going on, and that's all it is. It's just like, who's the next player, and then it's like, what's what's going on with that. It's just like, it's that little bit of a rush, and somehow there's this sense that we kind of have a know of what's going on, maybe too. Um, that we have like a I can't think of it, but we have a sense. I think that's part of it, that we have a sense of what's, that we know something about it. I think, I, I don't really think that that's accurate. Actually, I think it's the opposite. It's the exact opposite. It's rather that, like, we could be interested in art one day, we could be interested in hockey, but what it actually, it's more like, because of what we know makes it interesting. Like, it's not, art is not interesting, but until you start to look at the Kooning, and it's kind of like, it's weird. It is kind of like how they say, it's like, if you like learn about the person, then you understand it. But it is and it isn't, because it's not really about the Kooning. It's just that it's kind of like, you're not really learning about him. You're learning about that whole image of him. And then you're learning about that image of Picasso, but it really only serves for you to appreciate their art in that way that serves you for getting that fix, that fixation. That's all it is. So, it's just like, to put that argument to rest, that like Picasso, it's like they're always talking about that sort of violence toward women, and then when they see that he was like a misogynist, and they're putting the paint, but that the painting and that crudeness, or that vulgarity, or that aggressiveness, it does not actually, like, see, people think that it can't not relate, but it doesn't. It's more like they're two different things. Like, Picasso, as probably most of us men, was or is crude, violent, aggressive, has hidden this and hidden that, latent tendencies or whatever. Most of us men, all do. So Picasso's not really any different. He just had more money, or he had more power, or whatever. But as far as the art, the art has nothing to do with that. Picasso painted figures throughout his, that's one thing Picasso did in his 80 years of painting. He always painted the figure. Practically every single thing he ever did for 80 years, he always painted the figure. Can you forget that? Right? And then he became crude, he became sexual, he became erotic, he became lewd, crude and nude, whatever. But the fact, like, Picasso's painting was crude and brutal and bombastic and all those things, and it was focused on the figure, but those things really were not contained. Now you can say they might be contained in the sense that, was he that way to women? Or was he? Well, I think yes, he was, but I don't think he was violent. He was an asshole, maybe. He was a liar, a cheater, everything in the book, but it wasn't actually violent. Yeah, it wasn't actually brutal, and that's now just hang in there because here's the one thing that I don't hear people talking about. This is the thing. He apparently there is one incident where he smashed that woman in the face, Dora or his partner or whatever. So yeah, maybe there was an incident where of some violence too once or I don't know, but that that still is not really the point because what I'm saying is like look, de Kooning he wasn't violent, but he painted in a few of these paintings he painted violent looking pictures that had women in them, but he wasn't violent, right? Like so it's just like that's but here's the thing about Picasso. Picasso was he was very like sexually orientated. We know that. And like Picasso, I think he was very, very powerfully drawn to very sensual, very erotic women. Like I kind of one thing I always, or maybe I don't know if I'm reluctant to confess it, but I just think Picasso had really good taste in women. Like it's hard to kind of say that, but like I think Picasso, what can I say, picked women that were not conventionally beautiful, and yet they were like every woman that I see that Picasso was with, whether it was a girlfriend or the mistress or whatever, was very kind of stunning, you know, and like and not in a conventional way. And what that always seemed to me as, to be totally candid about it, is that like Picasso was a lover of women. Like he was very, very into women, you know? And like people think, well obviously, you know, like he slept with like how many countless women or whatever, like he's like the ultimate misogynist. But like to me, like I don't know, is that what misogynist is? I get like I don't know, like I don't wanna really praise it or condone it or whatever, but at the same time, like I just always seem to feel this sort of like understanding, or do you call it a kinship or whatever, like with a man that just like loves women, and like then when you think about it, it's like what defines artists of all things throughout history? They're always guys that are obsessed with women. That's what practically, you know, they're always talking about how history is his story and stuff, but like art, it's like, it's not a male or female thing, but it is filled with men who what? Loved women. And like practically the most ancient poetry and everything since then, and the most ancient art and everything since then, as you can see, like the Venus of Willendorf going way back to before any other art that ever existed, looks like a man obsessed with a woman, unless maybe a woman did it, right? Why should we assume it's a man? It could have been a woman did it. Sculptured herself, I don't know. But I get the sense that it was a man. So artists have always been obsessed with the female figure and with women. I think it's not so much their figure. I think it's their sensuality, you know? And so it's like, why should people single Picasso out? You know, it's kind of like more like he's just the same as all artists, but like I don't think he was actually. Like I can contradict that right away and say like no, I think he was excessively, yes, but I think he was very, very kind of seduced by women, and but it's like, why do they single him out? Well, it's like because he was more seduced by women. Is that bad? Or or is it the fact that he kind of had more power, more money, or he was more forceful, or whatever it was, but he seems to have had many more exploits or whatever, many more interactions with women, whether sexual or seductive or erotic or whatever. And so, it's like he kind of developed a bad image because of that, I guess. But, like, it's kind of weird because it's not really a bad thing in a way. It's like, it kind of seems like it's a good thing. Like, aren't men supposed to be obsessed with women in a way? Like, unless, like you don't understand what fuels a poet. Like, poets and artists are obsessed with everything, and chief among them is their obsession with women. That's the way it's always been. So, like, what you have here is a guy that he may actually be kind of a brutal person. Like, he may be ruthless, he may be mean, he may be vicious. And maybe, like, you could say his painting is about that. You could say, like, that's what the point I've come to say, what is abstract art? It's very carnal. It's very aggressive. It's very fleshly. It's very, it's this obsession with plastic. Plasticity of form, which is what? Sensuality. So it's like a perversion. Or it totally is a perversion. So you could say artists are twisted, artists are perverts or whatever, but it's actually more, you could say it's emotionally, spiritually, erotically, or sensually, but it actually doesn't really have to do with women. That's kind of the thing. And so it's like you could say, and like the reason kind of where you see where that really starts to matter is that, like, okay, so maybe he was somewhat perverse or somewhat excessive in any of those things, eroticism or sensuality or whatever. And in society that doesn't even seem to care about those things or judge those things, but like, let's say biblically or whatever, like sensuality and all these different things that Picasso or these other artists or that all of us people seem to be doing are considered to be inappropriate or sinful and evil or evil. So it's like we're all guilty of those things. So it's like, why pick on Picasso? And the thing is like, again, as I'm saying, like, there's really no record of him being like physically violent to my knowledge, except because I have read and studied quite a bit about Picasso, if not an enormous amount over the years. I have come across a situation where there was a record of this violent altercation in the scene, but to my knowledge, he was never like physically abusive or violent, with the exception of me encountering this one particular situation, which I can't say, it could be hearsay. So because I mean, like, one situation, like, I'm not trying to deny it. I just think that there is no evidence that he was, and same with many of these artists that come to mind. It's like there seems to be no evidence that they were violent towards women, even though they may be mean or they may have been verbally abusive, which is very serious. I should have overlooked that, or emotionally or verbally. But to me, there's a big difference when it becomes physical. And so the fact is that if they have restraint, like I don't want this to come across the wrong way, and it's like treading on very dangerous territory, but that's not the point of what I'm trying to say. Like, what I'm trying to say is that, like, I'm kind of trying to like say how they might have been bad or excessive or inappropriate and all these things, and yet they still kind of had restraint where they weren't actually physically violent. And like to me, the reason I'm emphasizing that is because like I'm trying to say that like it might not necessarily be as bad as their image would lead us to think they are. Like, I mean, doesn't it stand to reason that if they show restraint and self-control and they are not actually physically abusive, then, like, again, this is like, I'm just like walking into hot water here territory. But like what I'm attempting to do is kind of like redeem these people or their, to what end again? I don't know why. It's like, well, it's like, I just don't think that anybody should be misrepresented in a way that, it's like, I think that people should be represented in a way that's most true and honest. And so I don't, like, I think the fact that they are not physically violent or aggressive or abusive is very, very important, because it means that there's that restraint and there's that self-control that is absolutely critical. Like to me, what that means is that is the difference between a monster and a human being. So it's like a human being with all kinds of flaws and issues and problems is one thing, but it's a whole nother thing to be a monster, which to me, an abusive person is and I don't want to try to draw a distinction with emotional, verbal, or like spiritual abuse. But at the same time, I think that there is a very big difference when it becomes physical. Like then there is absolutely no excuse or denial of the fact that they are a monster. And so what I'm trying to do kind of is like try to redeem a person's image, like, hey, let's not call them a monster and assume that they're a monster if we don't kind of have actual, like, evidence of that. And so I think it's very important in a way, because it's like, I don't think that like it's not just like saying, oh, that's not fair to say that, even though everything inside of you may be like, that's exactly what I think, or that's exactly what I believe, or no. What I'm saying rather is that it's like, you really do not have a right to call anyone a monster if you don't have that kind of evidence. And if you think that or whatever, then it's kind of like, okay, maybe you think that or whatever, but it's still not really, it's totally, like, it's not that it's not really fair, or that it's unfair, it's totally unacceptable, it's totally unacceptable to, like, you're only, at best, or whatever, stooping to their level, or worse, if you're wrong. So it's like, it's totally unacceptable to to present people in that way or in that light. And yet, like, with Picasso, it's just like the thing is that I think with Picasso, it's like, for a lifelong admirer of, like, I would say Picasso and or his work, like I just feel like for me, I've recently been kind of like reviewing a lot of ideas and a lot of his work and stuff, and it's like surprisingly for me, like I think Picasso's work has fallen out of vogue quite a bit, and even for me, it seems like I've really had to kind of struggle to figure out like Picasso almost has surprisingly for like the first time in my life, but I think it was just like it kind of started. I encountered this a while ago, and then it kind of faded, and then it came back again quite dramatically. Whereas like Picasso's like practically one of the worst painters, like from the last century. Like all of it, like the tables have totally turned for the first time in my life, I would say. But it's not like I think there was kind of a sense of that, and then all of a sudden it came back kind of like again very prominently, where it's like again for the first time in my life because I always had this admiration, and then I kind of like lost that, and it surprised me. And then what's happened subsequently is I began to really see Picasso as a child, like as a very childlike man, or like a man in a child's body, like very like I guess it's like I'm older than he was for most of his life now, practically. So, or what happened? It's like the tables have turned for me, and now the I see the holes in the picture, kind of that of putting someone on a pedestal for so long, and now I see for my own self these problems. But I think it's again to redeem the idea for myself is like to redeem the idea of Picasso of myself for myself. What does it mean? Well, it's like I have to rekindle that idea of like what Picasso was doing at that time in history and whatnot. Like that's what it's all about. It's like what he was doing then, the ground he was breaking then, and how in the 90s and stuff when I was in university, like I think like that's another weird thing is that art seems to go in cycles, and I think Picasso is out of vogue. But I think in the 90s, Picasso was, and for a long time still, like Picasso was very, very popular, like extremely popular at that point. And it's only recently that maybe that popularity has really waned, and I think Picasso is now like seen increasingly with a very, very bad light. And the whole last century of modern art is seen in a very, very bad light, and it kind of seems like the whole era of modern art in the last century is out of vogue, is very much out of vogue now. It just seems like the art is all crude and somewhat childish, and it's just like, what were they trying to do? And so I think in all those cases, and Picasso's no exception, that you have to rekindle. It takes a little bit more effort, and like, I mean, it's not hard for me, but if it is hard for me, then how much more this generation that is totally out of touch with it? They just see it as old and just dated and clueless, like practically. Like they just do not understand, and they certainly wouldn't want to put any effort into it. Whereas I want to put in effort because I can't help it. I'm like, what was I interested in Picasso? But it's like that will not fade because he's like a lifelong mentor as an artist. So it's like, but I'm going like, what did I see in it? And then I'm like, wait a minute, like I'm just picturing looking at all those books for the first time. It's just like seeing the decorative things. And it was always like, Picasso was one artist that was always so bold, and like the thing was like he was always humorous, and it was like a lot of the humor seemed to be erotic too, like, and he was like very sort of brazen in his in his depictions. And you know, you just like, you have to appreciate those things because that's all there is. There never was much. So I mean, if you don't, if that's not your bag, that it never was, it never will be. Same thing. But in the total reverse way, it's like that's all there ever really was, and that's all there ever will be. It's like, it's more like when that novelty wears off, that I guess it's gone because that's all there ever really was. It's the novelty. Like I said, it's like opening those, for a book person, you know, it's like for me, opening a book and the excitement of every page is a different painting. That's all there ever was, and that's all there ever will be. But there is more, you know, like to it than that. And like to me, it's like Picasso was the ultimate painter of texture. You know, like his paintings are always a celebration of texture and brushwork. Like with Picasso, you can always see the brush. That's another very prominent distinction with Picasso. You can always see the brush, and what he did with it was great. Like you always see this blending, but it's very visible, and it's very, very, I was gonna say crude, but a much better word is very tactile. There's always this texture. And then there's often a repetition of just really sort of like banal or just silly decorative forms that he uses more or less just as filler. And like I forgot what it was like to do that, and it's such a good idea because it's such a good device. It's all it is a device, and you just need a device to fill the painting. So it shows just how dumb painting is. It's like you're literally filling the canvas with a mere device, and yet it's so much more honest than people that just paint a figure and then this hazy black background of nothing. So with Picasso, you see all these like prolific decorative motifs that are just really dumb, but they're actually just a display of his brushwork and his ingenuity on any given day because he painted every day. And so again, it's kind of like that thing where he's just doing those diamond shapes or those arabesques or different decorative motifs, but which are all sort of really silly and superficial or ephemeral or whatever, like countless ways of describing that. But it's all the it's that kind of combination of immediacy and ephemerality, I guess, that is where the fascination lies. And that's, I mean, if it's not there, then it's really nowhere. Because otherwise, what is it? Otherwise, it's just Picasso painting a different figure, maybe of some flowers. In the case of Chagall, it might have been some figures or some flowers, one or the other practically, or a kind of vaguely landscapish abstraction. You know, and it's just like, one day it's the flowers, one day it's the people, one day it's the landscape, then the next day it's the people again, and the next day it's the flowers again. And, you know, maybe once every decade they do a crucifixion scene, and once every, every 2 or 3 years they do, panoramic landscape scene or whatever, but it's basically then, that's all it is. It's just like round and round. So what's the novelty in that? Nothing. It's just like, it could be basically any person. It just happened to be their wife because that was the most convenient, or their partner, or whatever. And it could have been any other subject, but they just did some flowers, and because they wanted to do a still life, because it was so esteemed. So that is really sort of mundane and banal and meaningless. So it's not therein that lies the intrigue with art. If anywhere, it's the surrounding or the context wherein lies the fascination. It's how did they paint that? How did they paint that person? How did they paint their life? How did they paint that vase of flowers? And that is what art is all about. So, like, I'm kind of harping on this thing that what people don't, like, that to me is kind of like what the legacy of art or certainly or especially modern art is about. And like, I'm harping on the fact that art is not about painting a pretty picture, which like seems to be kind of where we're at now again, which has arguably existed in former times in history, but like painting a pretty picture means to me just painting something that's really extremely beautiful, but it's not really interconnected with his whole legacy of art, and it's really operating on a totally different wavelength, where the whole idea is kind of like how realistic, or it is sensual too, but in a different way. It's more just like people are just painting, like they're not conforming to any of those traditional themes. They're just painting random things that interest them or whatever, and that's fine and good, but to me, that's not really in keeping with the legacy of modern art and or art history and or great art in a way, or art that is going to be of lasting value. And the word value is a very key word, because I don't really know if there is any value in art at all. It's like, again, what is sports? Well, it's good for your exercising. Well, I guess maybe art is good for exercising your imagination or something, right? Or your mind. I don't know. But like, is there any good in it? Is there any true value? So what I'm maintaining is that the lasting value, if there is any, is in appreciating that sort of craft. It's how those time-worn themes are crafted in any given moment, or by any given artist, or by any given style or movement, or you might even say a zeitgeist, a spirit. I don't know if that's applicable in this situation, but it's just the general sense that I'm getting. How that the fashion of that age or time manifests itself with those time-worn themes. So what you're really looking at is these time-worn themes, and it's the same again with literature and with poetry, and maybe even philosophy to some extent. These literary, these painterly, or these aesthetic, maybe is a better word, themes are so often these time-worn themes. I just think that's really an apt description. And then how those time-worn themes are crafted. And so to me, that's what it's really about. And this, like, it's not about painting a pretty picture. Like, if you want to do that, it's fine. And there may be a lot of meaning, there may be a lot of success, there may be a lot of energy, enthusiasm, appreciation, or maybe there may be a lot of satisfaction in doing any or all of those things, and that's all good and fine. But I think, like, the final point to make about that is that I think that there is something there's something to be said for that, and part and parcel of that is that is a certain element of the being educated somewhat about it. I think when you're like being educated, informed on that legacy, and with those artists or whatever, I think can help. Again, another good word I think is cultivate. And if you can cultivate that interest, I think that is where the lasting value is, if any is to be found there. I really do feel like that's where the lasting value is, if you can cultivate that sort of relationship and appreciation with that legacy or you might say the extant or existing legacy of art. The closing word that I would like to say about that is that to me there is immense joy in and of that, so to speak. That's basically all I can say. So it's like, I don't know if there is that much value in it, but I certainly do think that there is an enormous and sort of never-ending amount of joy in all of that. And that really is what it's all about to me, is that it's a way of celebrating, experiencing, appreciating, and maybe manifesting that joy, or participating, partaking of that joy and that wonder and that experience.